This week's One Piece chapter saw the tearful reunion between Robin and Saul, but as usual with it there were a lot of details and secrets you may not have noticed, such as secret cameos by old characters, explanations to 19-year-old mysteries from Robin's flashback, and even the poneglyph containing the name of the Ancient Kingdom. So let's break down all the details in this chapter of One Piece. On the cover, Hold'em ends up kidnapping Tama, suggesting that he may have been the one behind the kidnappings. It makes sense as Hold'em wasn't at Onigashima when the raid happened, instead having been behind at Bakura Town, laying far to Okobore Town after realizing that Otsuru was protecting the samurai. While Tsuru did thankfully survive, Hold'em likely found himself in shock as he saw the beast pirates collapse, forcing him to escape and go into hiding, having to kidnap others in order to survive. Ryokugyu did storm Udon and disposed of all the remaining pirates there, though we later found out that King is still alive, likely simply captured, but since he never went to Bakura Town, which was another gathering spot of the beast pirates much further away in Kuri, those there like Hold'em likely all ran away after Kaido's defeat. Speaking of Hold'em, you may not know that he is actually a Wano native. In fact, his father is the man who appeared at the start of Odin's flashback as shaman who blamed Odin for bringing the mountain god into the capital, as many already thought was the case given their resemblance. His father's name is Norinosuke, and Hold'em was raised in Wano only to join the beast pirates. In this cover, Speed is burned on the ground, while smoke comes out of Hold'em's crotch lion, whose name is Kamijiro, translating to Bite Jiro. And this is because, if you remember, in chapter 917, Hold'em tried to attack Luffy by having Kamijiro spit an attack called Shishinohi, or Lion Fire, where he breathes a blast of fire, but Luffy easily broke through it and punched him with a red hawk. This attack is likely a pun on Shishinohi, or Lion's Day, which falls on April 4th in Japan. So in this case, Kamijiro attacks Speed with that same attack, making her fall to the ground defeated, while Hold'em holds Otama hostage. He does this by using his Karakurito, translating to mechanical sword, a name blade with which he tried to finish Luffy with, which is seen in this panel. Yamato can obviously more than easily beat Hold'em, but might want to be careful given the hostage Tama. Will Tama's Kunoichi abilities help her escape, I wonder? Also notice that the area around them is incredibly forested. And this is because when Ryokugyu passed by the area, he turned Udon into a green and vibrant region, hence all the flora sprawling on the ground here. We cut to a flashback 22 years ago, where Spandin tells the press about the incident of Ohara. If you don't recall, this is Spandam's father, who led the Buster Clone Ohara as a former leader of CP9. He lies out of his ass by blaming Robin for the destruction of the passenger ship, which in reality, if you remember, was destroyed by Sakazuki, Vice Admiral of the time, to ensure that no citizens of Ohara escaped, as is fitting of his justice motto of thorough justice. This references what was mentioned as early as Alabasta, where Masikaku, Tashige's assistant, told her that Nico Robin was known for sinking 6 marine battleships when she was the age of 8. In reality though, it was Saul who ended up sinking 5 marine ships, but in this case the 6th one is clarified to be the vessel that Sakazuki sunk, with Robin being blamed for it all. Spandin calls her a devil hiding in the body of an 8-year-old, which references how the government labeled the scholars of Ohara as devils, an ironic statement given how they are the real devils ruling the world. And this is how Robin came to obtain the epithet of Child of Devils, often just shortened to Devil's Child, and some fans just calling it Devil Child. Also in the corner left of the panel you can spot what might be Lasky, Spandin's fellow agent and the father of both Khalifa and Alpha. Even more ironically, the government claims to not want to make details public about the incident for the sake of not traumatizing the children, despite what they are very obviously doing to Robin. Among the compilation panels, we see an old lady claiming she saw Robin and that she had the eyes of a killer. This is actually the same lady from Robin's flashback in chapter 398 that offered to shelter her at a farm, only to sell her off to the government. Her name was revealed in a databook to be Kanezenni, whose name literally just means money, showing how willing she was to sell Robin out. Robin is forced to keep running away, rummaging through trash, eating in the snow, being chased by bounty hunters and marines, and hated by all. There comes a point where she truly contemplates wanting to end it all, according to her wish of, I want to die. Even when Luffy beat Crocodile at Alabasta, she was trying to take her life by being buried in the mausoleum when Luffy decided to stop her and saved her life. However, she recalls her mother's wish of, you have to live, Robin, as well well as Saul's words, giving her just a little strength to keep pushing on. At a town of peculiar architecture in the West Blue, Robin finds a geography book, but where Ohara should be is completely empty, having been erased from maps, so she instead adds the island herself. As any detail, Kuzen helped Robin escape from Ohara by heading to a nearby island via a rowboat. Said nearby island can be spotted here at the edge of the map, not too far from Ohara. Robin is further hounded by all kinds of horrible remarks, from people calling her little to others outright telling her to go self. Out of the trauma and back to the present day, the ship of the giants, the Great Eric, makes its way onto the sun world by landing from the rainbow onto sea clouds, which serve as a dock on this higher level. Girth's group instead arrives on what they call a Zvar. It's a ship that can quite literally fly in the air by taking advantage of island clouds, which float in the air, and attaching them to the oars of a rowing boat to keep the flying ship afloat. Its kanji reading is Kirifune, or fog ship. This is likely a reference to the Skiv Blavnir, the mythical ship of Norse mythology, a ship said to be able to fly in the sky in much a similar way. Meanwhile, Lilith already puts together all the science behind all these things being able to operate and how to potentially reproduce it. As Hyrule reunites with Luffy, he thanks them for having defeated Big Mom, the enemy of the giant race, due to what happened in her flashback. In fact, during her flashback we even saw Hyrule trying to kill her, only to be stopped by the other giants due to Mother Carmel's pleas. However, Luffy is confused, as not only does he not know what Big Mom's past connection is, but he also isn't even the one who brought her down. Ironically, the one to truly defeat her was wiped by Elbaph's giants for opposing Shanks. Girth adds some context to what Big Mom did, even calling her Lin Lin, as she was originally a friend of hers up until the disastrous night where she razed down the village of Elbaph, even being the one to warn Mother Carmel. However, let's not forget that it appears that Yorl is still alive, having just been mentioned by Girth a few chapters back. We can also see someone being crucified in the background who is seemingly Road being made to pay for his crimes. As Hyrule calls his crew the Four of Us, Road briefly adds Five of Us. Hyrule also calls us up as Usoland due to the events of Dressrosa. The group dances on Hyrule and Girth's palms, while Jinbe instead relaxes atop Goldberg's shoulder, Frankie on top of Stansen's shoulder, and Chopper atop his helmet. Sanji, of course, still continues phoning over Girth. However, the giants decide to cut the explanation short for now to instead prepare the upcoming party at what is evidently a tavern given the sign with two mugs at the top, similar to the sign with two axes on the right. The castle gates can be seen on the left, indicating this is the middle of the village. Among the cheerful giants, Dory and Broggy beckon at the tavern's entrance, and there are several we can recognize from the attack on Egghead, as well as a bear, oddly enough. Also, as an interesting detail, we saw in Hyrule's cover story that Goldberg's shield had a tongue sticking out of it with a grin, and yet in this page it appears to be slipping now that it's not in use, suggesting it may actually move or even be alive. Is it a homie or some other kind of ability-powered creature? Robin, however, requests a moment to go meet Saul, and they are accompanied by Girth on the Svar, and we get cardinal locations for the island of Elbaph, which are useful to help orient ourselves. The village we were just at is the West Village, Nishinomura, and we are now traveling towards the southwestern region. We know where the village was respective to the island, since it features the castle we saw in the big view of Elbaph, meaning that said view of Elbaph is seen from the west. Given how this village appeared on the map as being located in the central to left area, it means that this is westward, with the area we are heading now being the southwest, the lake area we can see on the panel of the island from afar. Said location is on the branch of a tree, from which several waterfalls descend in what is called Senshi no Izumi, or the Fountain of Warriors. This could perhaps be a reference to the famous Fountain of Youth of Norse myth. Built atop it is the Fukuro no Toshokan, or the Owl Library, as evident by the symbol of an owl featured at the top of it. It is likely within there that the books of Ohara are being kept. The idea that we might be visiting the preserved books of Ohara is incredible incredibly exciting though. In there, not only should have the research of the poneglyph from Ohara have survived, which is one that seemingly includes the name of the ancient kingdom, but also the research of at least one other poneglyph, which Vegapunk read, the one detailing info about Joy Boy being the first pirate. Let's just hope that unlike the poneglyphs at Holkekalan and Wano, that we actually get to find out about them now, instead of just being kept in mystery while Robin has already read them. Garth explains that the reason why there is a beach here though, is because remains of the tree became fossilized and withered, turning into grains that act like sand on a beach. Garth also claims that under the library there is a school, perhaps the other building seen in the panel, as Saul Sensei helps educate the giants. It's funny how beloved he's become here, considering that in chapter 392 he called the giants of Elbaph savages, and how he was nothing like them, as other clans of peaceful giants exist too, but perhaps because of that he is trying to educate them more. Luffy tells Robin that when someone has helped someone in the crew, then it's only proper manners that they go and thank them directly. Robin playfully teases Luffy in a far more cheerful mood than she usually is in, featuring a vastly different speech pattern in this chapter compared to how she usually speaks, likely due to how excited she is to meet Saul again, asking Luffy where he heard such a thing. This is in fact, however, something that Ace told him in chapter 589, as in his flashback he said it's normal to thank someone who helped someone dear to you, which referred to Ace wanting to thank Shanks for helping Luffy, with the language being almost the same in Japanese, something Ace would have done much later when he finally met Shanks. In the meantime, Robin is still hugging Bonnie, giving major mom energy. However, a giant comes running, claiming that Saul Sensei collapsed and isn't moving. This is the same giant that made them claim a couple chapters ago, as evident by the hairstyle. However, this turns out to have all been a ruse all along, as Robin knows what is going on. As she walks up to him, we get a heartwarming one-to-one recreation of Robin and Saul's first meeting, almost panel per panel, with both Robin and Saul wearing very similar clothing. Robin in fact changed outfits halfway through the chapter to look even more like her childhood self. We are properly reintroduced to Jaguar D. Saul, who appears fairly similar but with some changes. He was 105 when he first appeared, making him 127 years old now, but given how slowly giants age, he hasn't really changed much, the only major difference being his mustache having grown out, which he has now styled in the shape of pigtails, pretty similar to how Loki styled his hair actually. His changes come more from his wounds though, having several scars over his body. Two large scars now run over his face, while another can be seen on his arm and leg. Said leg is actually missing an entire foot, now instead walking on a peg leg. He explains that said scars came from the fact that the fires of Ohara melted the ice encasing him, causing him to fall down onto the water below, saving his life. It's unclear if Kuzan purposefully knew that this would happen, or if this was unbeknownst to him, particularly since he mentioned Saul dying to Robin when talking with her in chapter 433. His leg had already been injured by the time he disembarked on Ohara, so it likely became too damaged after he froze over. We should also address the elephant in the room, being the fact that these fire-induced scars would make Saul a prime candidate for being the man known as Hinokizu or Fire Scar, a theory that has prevailed for a long while now, but that doesn't fully add up with the description of a man in a pitch-black vessel who can create whirlpools, so we don't know for sure. Either way, he also speaks with a very strong dialect, the same one he used in Robin's flashback, using the first-person pronoun washi with katakana and ending his sentences with de, which is why you may have seen him speaking with a bit of a dialect in some translations, sounding a bit like an older man or a more gruff-sounding person. The two catch up on various things, such as Saul comparing Robin to her mother's kind eyes, Vegapunk's message passing on the will of the scholars of Ohara, and his scars. During the speech about the scholars of Ohara, we see Clover and Olvia, as well as many of the other named scholars, such as Bushiri, Rinto, Zadi, Gram, Hak, Hocha, and Roche. However, Robin says that she doesn't want to talk about depressing things anymore, so she instead asks Saul to praise her for being alive, citing the chapter's title, Homete Hoshi, or I Want to Be Praised. He tells her, "Well done on being alive, Robin. Well done on having stayed alive for 22 years. Well done on having come to meet me." And within those words, Robin is reminded of her desperate plea she made many years ago. "I want to die," which later became "I want to live," and now has become "I wanted to meet you."